And joining us in the studio is Sinijlawi, a Fatah activist from Jerusalem and chairman of the Jerusalem Development Fund, and Asher Ben-Artzi, a research fellow at the International Institute for Counterterrorism at Reichman University, who spent 34 years of service with the Israeli Security Agency, better known as the Shabak or Shin Bet, and with the Israeli National Police, where he served as the director of the Interpol and International Operations Division. Gentlemen, thank you for being with us. Samir, I don't think anyone expects that a condemnation from Mahmoud Abbas would deter that kind of terror attack or the terror attacks we've seen the last week. But the idea maybe is to just sort of ease tensions generally going into the Ramadan holiday next month, where there is concern maybe for broader civil unrest. But will it have any impact? And how do you see the situation developing in the coming month?
Well, first of all, I am not a fond of Abbas. I am a critic of him, but I think he is sincere in his condemnation. This is he expressed himself, and he has been always against violence. And I think this could represent 80%, 85% of Palestinians who really don't see that violence can lead to any political gains. I think we always see that there is a lot of hatred. We have seen some scenes, and these scenes can be on the other side sometime. Both societies, they have hatred. It's a common enemy, and we need to fight it. I think this is not only a security problem, and it cannot be seen, this conflict cannot be seen only through security lenses. This is political, and it should have dealt long ago through political means. If we continue to give the Palestinian file, and this is what's happening on the Israeli side, who's leading the Palestinian file is the Shin Bet, and the Shin Bet is trying to solve this huge rooted historical conflict through security tactics, and it will not help. Nobody can control this kind of threats that can emerge from one time to time. I think it's a time, and I call for all leadership, Palestinian, Israelis, regional leadership, to start putting some political and diplomatic effort, to start trying to dig into the roots of this conflict. It's a pity that we keep seeing innocent victims falling sometimes here, falling sometimes there. We should try to teach our kids, teach the young generations that we should shed the same tears for any victim, regardless what is the nationality, what is the religious, what is the color of any person. The sanity of life is important. We need to teach this generation.
Asher, certainly you can respond to Samir's comments, which you may well want to respond to, but I also want you to address more generally the question of the Shin Bet or Shabak, because it is getting a lot of criticism right now over how it's dealt with the situation so far.
Yes, okay. First of all, good evening, but the evening is not so good. It's a very sad evening because we are going to a new age of terror inside Israel, and I'm very sad. But if you ask me who is responsible, it's not just Shin Bet who is responsible. It's all of us, because who committed the attack yesterday? It was an illegal residence in Beni Brak. Who is the employer of this illegal residence? The employer is Israeli citizen. Don't do it. But okay, so we are the blame. All the citizens of Israel.
Right, the government, and there's criticism, criticism that the government has not cracked down on employers that bring in Palestinians without...
all of us, yes. We are the blame. But if you ask me if there is an intelligence failure of Shin Bet, probably yes. Yes, because we didn't expect from Israeli Arabs, and I'm talking about the attack in Hadera, to be involved in direct terror. But it happened. I can tell you that if you remember, I have some numbers. Just a minute. If you remember the terrible period, it was between 1993 and 2011. The suicide attacks in Israel. 18 years of suicide attacks. You remember the buses and etc. In these 18 years, we lost 127 Israeli people. From this number of we lost
No, many more.
Yeah. We lost 735 people, Israeli. And then the total number of the attacks in these 18 years was 127. From this huge number of attacks, 127, only one attack was committed by Israeli Arab. Only one attack.
And now we've had 2 within the space of a week.
Yes. And now we have involvement of Israeli Arabs in attacks. This is very sad. In the past, the involvement of the small involvement of the Israeli Arabs was a good surprise for me, and I was happy. But
you mean in the years when you were with the police and the Shin Bet?
Yes.
Right. Well, we don't have all that much time, but when we come back, I do want to ask you, because one of the striking things is that 2 of the attacks were inspired by the ideology of Islamic State and ISIS, which is certainly something beyond and different from Palestinian nationalism. So when we come back, I do want to ask you both about that, because that is certainly a disturbing aspect of these attacks. So Samir Sinijlawi and Asher Ben Otzi, stay with us. We're going out for a break. Please stay with us. We're going to continue with our special coverage of the current wave of terror attacks in Israel. As we know, those are scenes there from the funeral today. 3 attacks within the space of 1 week. 11 people killed in the course of these attacks. Lots more on this special broadcast. Stay with us. We're back after a break.
This is not my bag.
This is not my bag. Follow the itinerary, find the bag.
An adventure.
Maybe she puts an itinerary together. They come in love.
This man has my bag.
I have her bag. She has my heart.
Love is beautiful.
The Middle East. I-24 News is a witness. Our journalists live and breathe there every day. Get all the latest global news from our studios in Tel Aviv, New York, Washington, and Paris. Anytime, anywhere. Download the I-24 News app, available on Roku, Amazon Fire, Apple, and Google stores. I-24 News, see beyond.
Welcome back to this special edition on I-24 News as we look at the current wave of terror attacks that have struck Israel over the past week. Still with us in studio, Samir Sinijlawi, Fatah activist from Jerusalem and chairman of the Jerusalem Development Fund, and Asher Ben Otzi, research fellow at the International Institute for Counterterrorism at Reichman University, former and a veteran of both the Israeli Security Agency, or Shin Bet, and Israel National Police. And Samir, one of the things that have struck people, and this is one of the things Samir, that people have put said has been a failure of the Shin Bet is the appeal that Islamic State or ISIS has had for some elements within the Israeli Arab community. In your experience, do you hear it's still something that is, and we have seen some manifestations, for example, in Gaza. But in your experience in the Palestinian side, do you see much of an appeal of people drawn by that ideology, even after the so-called caliphate was destroyed?
Well, I think the cross-border terrorism is always a threat in the region. Although ISIS has been officially dead, it does not exist anywhere, not in Iraq, not in Syria, maybe in some places like Sinai or Libya. But it's always a cross-border terrorism is always a threat. What worries me more, and he spoke about the involvement of the Palestinians inside Israel, the Israeli Arab, into this kind of violence. I think there is some kind of equation between freedom, rights, and violence. And the more leaders in Israel, like Shaked, is trying to impose laws that is...
Ayelet
Shaked is trying to impose laws like the family unification recent law and the nation-state law. These kind of laws that makes 20% of the society feel attacked, feel oppressed, feel underprivileged, will always create an atmosphere, an environment that will lead for violence. It's a proven, it's science. If you give people more rights, equal rights, they will not turn to violence. But if you start oppressing and imposing things on their soldiers, then they will start, trends of violence will start emerging from society. And this is where the politicians should be looking at now, not about security or increasing the number of the police. There should be some kind of real equality in this society, both inside Israel, but also the Palestinian question should be solved.
Okay, that is an issue of debate here, but we're not here to debate those particular issues. But Asher, I do want to ask you about this point, which specifically the Shabak has been criticized for not being more aware of the fact that there were individuals within Israel who still follow the ideology of ISIS to the point where they would act on it.
Okay, let me give two answers, two kind of answers. First of all, yes, Shabak, Shin Bet is responsible for the counter-terrorism in Israel, not the police. Shin Bet is responsible. And maybe Shin Bet was not aware so much to the phenomenon because involvement of Israeli Arabs was quite a sensitive idea and quite a new idea. We knew that only Palestinians and Arabs who arrive from overseas, they can be involved in terror. But the new phenomenon is Israeli Arabs. Regarding ISIS, we like the idea. We like to think that ISIS is dead. Maybe ISIS is dead as an organization, but the idea is pretty much alive. And we can see ISIS cells in Sinai. We can see some ISIS ideas among the Israeli Arabs. I'm not sure that the headquarters of ISIS, if there is such an headquarters, knew that in al-Fahim there is a cell of ISIS. They were acting for themselves.
But this is often how we've seen Islamic State or ISIS terror attacks take place. They're not organized or directed. It's more of an ideology that inspires. Okay, well, there is also an international element to the efforts to deal with the situation in Israel. And from Amman to Jerusalem, Israeli officials are engaging in diplomatic efforts aimed at restoring calm and preparing for what may still come ahead. Our diplomatic correspondent Eli Hochenberg has the details on the historic visit of Israel's president to Jordan today and the latest from the foreign ministry here in Jerusalem. Let's take a look at that.
Enhanced security and enhanced diplomacy. Israeli leaders are boosting diplomatic efforts to bring about a calming of tensions. Israeli President Isaac Herzog arrived Wednesday at the palace of Jordan's King Abdullah, a historic visit, with Herzog being the first president to pay a public visit to Jordan and be received at an official ceremony with a red carpet and honor guard and Israeli flags. The visit, fully coordinated with the Prime Minister, Foreign Minister and their offices, comes amid spiking terror attacks in Israel and their condemnation by the Jordanian king.
And here, sir, I would like to point out that we completely and utterly condemn any kinds of violence, as we witnessed so many tragic attacks on civilians on both sides, and especially what happened last night.
We must fight together any type of terror and cooperate together for the benefit of the security of our nations. We in Israel are extremely sad today. People are brought to funeral, and I thank you for your condemnation.
It was only on Tuesday when King Abdullah met in Ramallah with Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas, where he called on Israel to refrain from unilateral marches in Jerusalem, especially to the Al-Aqsa Mosque. A few hours after that meeting, it was Israeli Defense Minister Beni Brak visiting Jordan and meeting the king in a bid to prevent any further escalation on the ground. Meanwhile, in Jerusalem, it was Foreign Minister Yair Lapid who hosted his Austrian counterpart Alexander Schellenberg Wednesday, with the Austrian Foreign Minister praising the historic Negev summit days ago, in which 4 Arab foreign ministers joined Israel and the U.S. at an unprecedented gathering in Israel.
We are meeting in a difficult and painful day. 5 people were murdered yesterday by a terrorist. The third such attack in a week. Our meeting today, like the Negev meeting, the Negev summit earlier this week, with the Secretary of State of the United States and the foreign ministers of Egypt, the UAE, Morocco and Bahrain, is the best response for terror. Peace and friendship are the alternative to violence and chaos.
It's shocking that terrorism is again showing its ugly face. And I want you and I want the people of Israel to know that Austria stands side by side with you. That Austria feels for the people here in Israel, for your fight. And yes, we're conducting this fight together.
With tense weeks still ahead, Israel's diplomatic ties pose an inherent part of its defense strategy.
And Samar, King Abdullah of Jordan remains, I think you would have to say, the Arab leader most committed in the region to the Palestinian issue still. And we know he didn't go to that Negev summit, reportedly, because he felt that issue wasn't being dealt with there. How much influence, though, does he actually have on, let us say, the Palestinian street? And again, taking it into next month's Ramadan holiday, with a lot of concerns focused, especially in Jerusalem and the holy sites there.
Well, I think we admire the courage of King Abdullah and his political wisdom. You can see that last week there have been 3 important visits to Amman. It was the president, the Israeli president, Yair Lapid was there, Gantz was there, and the Minister of Internal Security was there.
Right.
So he's doing a lot of positive diplomacy, trying to serve the security of both Palestinians and Israelis. I see him as a man that continues to be most committed to peace. He started peace before all the others. In 93, his father has signed peace with Israel. He has a very serious responsible attitude toward the problem, and I think his diplomacy with the top Israeli leaders will lead to them to understand more how do Arabs in general, Muslims, Christians, and Palestinians see the problem that we are facing now before Ramadan. And there are always risks, with the news that Ben Gvir decided to visit Al-Aqsa tomorrow.
You mean the far-right member of Knesset?
Yes, and nobody still knows what he has on the plan. He's trying to do a promo before Ramadan. This kind of provocations will light up fire in the street. And we could see something that has been witnessed last year, where again, it has been proven that the Israeli Arabs are not far away from the conflict, are engaged into the conflict, and we're in the street, and we have seen different type of security situations. Again, I hope that we can have more leaders like King Abdullah that are directly addressing the issue, encouraging everybody to focus on what will really lead to peace. I don't see why the Palestinians were not invited to Negev. Why Jordan hesitated to go there? Because I mean, if you talk about peace, how can you achieve peace for the average Israeli in the street without having the Palestinians involved?
I do want to go to Asher though, because while we're focusing, of course, on this evening on the terror attacks, we maybe can lose sight of the bigger picture of what's happening in the Middle East, which is the remarkable development and change that we've seen in the past 2 years here, as expressed certainly on the stage there at the Negev summit, even if King Abdullah and the Palestinians were not there.
Well, I'm not a politician, but I agree with my friend. King Abdullah is very clever. He's a very clever politician. He knows how to do, what to do and how to behave. I'm not a politician, so I don't want to give a direct answer, but I hope that such a summit will help.
Well, you are a security figure, and of course, the security, one of the aspects of that is security cooperation with countries and parts of the Arab world that Israel never had, or certainly never had openly.
Yeah. The security cooperation is the most important item, the most important thing today, because Israel has new options now, and the Arab countries has new options together with Israel. Israel is very popular in the Gulf, in the UAE countries. Israel can help to the situation.
All right. Gentlemen, I just want to ask you a final word here. Samar, do you think next month we are going to have, I'm not talking about individual attacks of the six we see, but the general situation on the ground, how do you see it happening?
Well, one person will decide what will happen, Ben Gvir. He will decide whether it will be a calm, whether Ramadan and Pesach and Easter will be ceremonial, spiritual occasions, or they will turn to be just seen for violent and escalation. One person will decide, and it depends on him.
And Asher, as a security expert, your view, just briefly, just in about 30, 40 seconds.
I'm afraid that I have to agree with my friend. Ben Gvir, the parliament member, can set fire in the field. I hope that he's going to withdraw from his attention. But if you ask me about the police, the Israel National Police has now a new mission. The entire police is going for security now. Right. All the courses in the police finished. All
we are going to have to leave it at that. Sinijlawi On and Asher Ben Artzi, thanks for joining us.